Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Soulganize Your Life podcast, where I know as myself, as a person on this planet, that the more that I Soulganize my life, the more I'm really enjoying being a human. And the outer circumstances of our lives are usually stimulating our inner environment in two very distinct ways. The first way is what, as a therapist, I would call the psychological ego. And the second way is through our soul connection to all that is. So, why is it important to know the difference? Well, that's where our guests come in. They are invaluable at helping us. I would call them experts in both the ego and the soul as well. To help us understand these two very different perspectives that are in conflict often with one another, and to integrate it into one full, beautiful, messy human experience. And I'm really excited to have someone all the way from Spain today, but was born in Holland. And I'm going to do my best to say her name correctly right now. And it's Baukia, right?
Very good. Yes.
I had to practice it like 2 times with her. But such a fellow soul, I believe, who really understands the ego and the soul. We very much have the same perspective. But just, again, would love to hear you jump right in and tell me, when did you first encounter your ego?
Well, that was actually at a very young age. But I would say the combination of when I really started to become aware of it was when I was 25. I went to a healer in my search for happiness and out of the brokenness and all the trauma that my family had brought. And her name was Hope Ryan. If you're watching this, seeing this, listening, I send you lots of love. And she started talking to me about how I chose these parents to be my parents, how reincarnation works, what the chakras do, and all of that. So then I started to become aware, wait a minute, there's something bigger going on, which I kind of intuitively already knew from a young age, but now she gave words to it.
Yeah, how did your ego take that, to think that you chose your parents and your trauma?
Well, at first I was like really angry at myself.
Yes.
Like, how could I be so stupid? because the family that my soul chose for me to born into was just like a really, really dysfunctional family. Like neglect and abuse were just daily normal things to
Oh, wow.
happen. Yeah, so my mother, she was just a broken human being, just broken.
Mm. Wow.
And I had a psychiatrist in the dozen of therapists. There was a psychiatrist coming around, and he was saying, well, if you want to look at how parents give their children psychological disorder, look at your mom. She's like
Wow.
textbook example. And my brother, who is now a psychologist, he's working with families like we used to be, and he's saying, Bauchi, if we would be young right now, we would just be taken away from our parents.
Oh my
They would
goodness.
we would just take it because it was just so bad. It was just
Wow.
horrible. So I needed to recover. I needed to heal that.
Yeah.
And so I went.
So without explaining, or having to relive on this podcast what you went through, how did you survive your childhood? Because as Freud would say, we have to develop protection mechanisms, defense mechanisms, and a separate sense of self, as I am not this trauma that I'm being bestowed upon, right? Like, I'm not this person. We have to sort of create this separate sense of ourself and protect it at all costs if we're going to survive trauma. So what was your particular defense mechanism, would you say? How would you handle the abuse?
Of course, I thought I was adopted.
Okay.
I just thought, these are not my parents. I don't belong to them. They don't belong to me. I'm just adopted.
Wow. So you created a illusionary boundary in your mind that there's no way that this is the truth of who I am.
Exactly.
what did you do physically? Did you hide? Did you fight back? Did you, what did
No,
you do?
no. I tried to be the good girl,
Okay.
which, doesn't fit my personality at all. But I tried to be the good girl. I tried to, I needed to keep my mom, especially when my dad went away and left my mom with 5 children. I needed to keep my mom to let her survive. So I was her mother. I was her psychiatrist. I was her caregiver. I was her cleaning lady. I was her cook. I was just
Wow.
all from
Wow.
the age of like 10, and already before that, I was taking care of my siblings. I was changing diapers. I was doing all the mommy stuff with my siblings. So
Wow.
I kind of carried that family, not kind of, but I carried that family and also energetically carried them just to survive.
Wow. So you became the ultimate caretaker and pleaser, and you had to monitor your mom like a hawk, I'm guessing, to make
Oh,
sure
yeah.
that any movement that you were there to sort of sweep up whatever mess was going to occur.
Plus to keep my siblings safe.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I mean, she was an alcoholic and she could just lash out of nowhere. So I mean, me coming home from school, it was already like, okay, I gotta say. So my antennae, my sensitivity grew very much because I had
Mhm.
to just be sensitive to what's going on, what's going to happen.
Yes.
But also my sense of self actually kind of disappeared.
Hmm.
I was in this symbiotic relationship where I disappeared and it was all about her or
Wow.
my
And I was,
siblings or what everybody else needed.
yeah. So maybe in psychology, we'd call that a codependency, right? Where I can only survive if this person is okay.
Yeah.
And the hyper focus on others, right? And so, how did you get to a point where you said, okay, enough is enough? I'm going to go talk to a therapist about this? Or how did that work for you?
Well, it was just the emotions that I had inside, especially when I started to be 16 years of age and older, when I started to fight back, when I started to rebel, finally, dared to rebel. I became a punk rocker. And I mean, my mom would tell me, come home at 1 in the evening, and I would just come home at 1, the next day.
Wow.
In the afternoon. I was just like, I'm gonna do it my way.
Yeah.
But the emotions and the just the what we in the spiritual world call the contractions, feeling so contracted all
Hmm.
the time, like
Yeah.
it was just unbearable because I
Yeah.
was just so far removed from myself that I just felt awful.
Yeah. So, up until that point, had you had any sense that you were a soul? Or were you just completely identified with your family and the stress and the trauma?
Well, I remember as a young child, because I grew up my family was like super atheistic, like we were forbidden to do anything with religion.
Okay.
But we were growing up in quite a religious town. And I remember thinking about God and thinking, okay, I think God has put me in this town, in this family to test me, to see how I'm doing, to see how I'm getting out of here, or how I should be as a being. And I do remember thinking that there must be this higher power because otherwise it doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah, and it's interesting you said God might be testing me. I feel like that is a first step for a lot of us in the spiritual seeking is we think, am I being tested? Why did he give me this problem? Why am I being, forced to have to deal with this? I feel like we kind of think of it as a test at least at first, right? And so so you said you sort of changed your persona. You turned into a punk rocker and you became a drummer, and it sounds like probably got a lot of relief or release from your creativity finally. That is your soul connection, it sounds like.
Yes, but also in playing the drums, I found out that sometimes you do gigs and everything just clicks.
Hmm.
There's like this, you must have it the same way with some interviews, everything just clicks. It
Yes.
feels like magic.
Yes.
You
Flow.
know, the energy flows,
Hmm.
and especially if you're on a stage playing with other musicians and there's an audience there, and you feel that everything is going up in vibration, and I was like, what is this? You know,
Yes.
I
Yes.
want to learn how to do this, how
Yes.
to feel this, because it feels
Yes.
like a group orgasm, you know, like
Yes.
everybody at the same time having a great orgasm, and
Yes.
everybody leaving the club just floating a half a meter above the ground, and
Yes.
just this amazing feeling. So, you know, that was my first sense of, wait a minute, you know, I think I can do this. I think I can. So I went on a path to find out, how am I going to get in this flow?
Yeah. And so for you, you didn't just think it's only going to happen in music. You're thinking I could do this in other areas of my life or all the time.
Well, of course, that took a few years, because at
Yeah.
first I was like, okay, you know, this is the way I feel with some gigs, not all of the gigs.
Yeah.
And I was just like in my mind trying to figure out, well, you know, what other conditions but it didn't make sense, you know, because sometimes some conditions that I thought were really important were not important at all,
Hmm.
or you know, so it's something completely else. It's something completely different. And then after, you know, playing for like 15 or 20 years as a professional drummer, then I was like, you know, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of the rock and roll lifestyle. I want to do something else. So then a fellow musician, he helped me on my way, and he said, after we had a conversation, an in-depth conversation about his love life, and then he said, you should become a coach. And I was like,
Hmm.
of course. You know, I've been helping people all my life. This was just, I mean, in Holland we have a saying, like the dime falls, you know, it falls into place. So I had this feeling at this moment, this is right, this is what I should do.
So how did your ego handle the transition from being titled a professional musician to completely changing your egoic identity, right? Like your personality or whatever you might call it. You know, how did your ego handle that? Or was your soul so much a part of you at that point that it was easy transition?
No, 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 it was not easy. I mean, I had to, there were so many people, fellow musicians or people that I knew, that just said, Bauke, you're crazy. You're crazy. Leaving this behind, something magical. Even like I remember at a certain club where there was a Hell's Angel as a guardian at the door. Even this Hell's Angel said, Bauke, you're leaving us, but something magic happens when you go on that stage, and we're going to be poorer for it. So there were so many people, they didn't understand, but I was like, I mean, at that time, I felt like the gigs that I was doing, I had the same feelings with it as ironing my clothes or doing the
Mm,
dishes. I
mm,
had just, I mean, I don't know how to put this, you know, but I was at that time playing for money. And so a lot of times I felt like the jukebox, or it doesn't matter, and all these drunk people coming to tell me how great it is, and
yeah.
oh, you know, it's all, you never see a woman play this good, blah, 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 you know, all this ego. And I was like, I'm done with it. I just can't deal with it anymore.
Yeah.
So
So,
I was determined.
so what made you, a lot of us integrate, our soul, pursuits, right? Like coaching while we're still drumming. But it sounds like you made a real hard stop and that there must have been something meaningful about that. Can you
Yeah.
speak to that?
There was because I did try after I thought, okay, I'm going to stop. You know, there was this one American guitar player. blues player that said, I've got a small tour in Europe. Please come. I just love playing with you. And I said, okay, it was just 3 gigs. And I thought, okay, let me just do it. Let me just figure out, do I really want to quit this?
Mm-hmm.
And I just knew
Yeah.
from the first note that we played, no, I'm done with this. I'm just done.
Wow.
So I didn't see any other way, and I didn't want to do anything else than be a coach.
Wow.
I was just determined this is going to happen. And then within a year, thank you, Soul, I had my practice going. I was living off of it. I had clients. It was going really well.
Yeah. So tell us about that transition. How did you fully step into your soul's purpose? Other than like you said, I intuitively knew I was done, but so many egos affect us, right? People constantly coming to you, telling you, please keep playing, you're magical, it's amazing, right? And a lot of times I think a lot of people stay on their path because of other egos, right? But there was something in you that knew, no, I'm ready to step into my soul journey. Had you done some level of healing that you felt like you could see your ego for what it was? Or, I mean, how did this happen for you?
I was just determined. The drums is over. I'm going to sell my drum kit. And everybody thought it was crazy too. And it was just, I'm done.
Wow.
And I have been in my life. In Holland, it's a bad thing if you say this, but I'm using my own wisdom. So
Why is it bad to say in Holland? I mean, it's bad to say everywhere probably, but why in Holland specifically?
well, it kind of, they have certain sayings about it in Holland where it means that you're not listening to the boss, you're not listening to your parents, you're using your own wisdom.
Yes. And they don't like that.
No.
Yeah, they don't like it here either. But that's what we're doing, right? Is changing that perspective, and that in the world, we need the age of Aquarius to enter fully, which is about individualism and expression of the self. And how do you trust yourself, right? How do you get to that point where what you just said is, I'm done, and just do it, right? Like, because that feels so scary to the ego. And if you can listen to Byakuya and understand that sometimes just be done and do the thing, that it's probably going to be okay. And especially right now in the age of Aquarius, right? That's what we're being asked to do.
Yes. Well, if it feels like draining your energy, then it's draining your energy. How can that be good for you?
Yes. And how do we trust ourselves to listen to the soul over the ego? Well, one is you have to be very sure what is the ego, and more curious about what is my soul. So can you, in your own words, now that you've been coaching people and you have such an understanding of the ego, right? As you, like, I love on one of your podcasts, you called it the trickster. And it's like a chess player that just gets better and better at what it does to convince you to stay small and safe. But what is your distinction between your ego and your soul?
Well, the distinction is actually really easy made. If it feels good, it's my soul. If it doesn't feel good, but it's my ego. So if it feels like a contraction, then it's my ego who is, on the steering wheel. But if it feels expansive, then my soul is on the steering wheel.
So when you apply that to real life, right? Like, some people would say, well, it feels good for me to like not go to work and smoke pot all day. It's like, does it really? And how do you help people work through that emotional pleasure versus serenity that the soul, right? The ego is seeking the pleasure, right? And the soul is seeking something expansive. Like, is pot smoking in your house without going to work actually expanding you? I don't know, maybe for a little bit, but like, what would you say to that? Because
I really love your question, because I've been addicted to pot like for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that for me, and I think for all egos, some egos just have it really hard. They have a lot of suffering and pain inside of them, and they need an escape. And it can be pot, it can be working too hard, it can be sports, it can be games, it can be just about anything. It can
Yeah.
be even be in a kind of a visualization fairy tale life where you're not really in your own life grounded in the here and now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, yeah, smoking pot doesn't feel good. It might, but after a while, you're like, okay, my energy is stuck. I'm
Yeah.
stuck.
Mm-hmm.
So in the short run, it might feel good. It
Yeah.
doesn't feel expensive, by the way, but it feels like, okay, I got this warm blanket over me and I don't
Yes.
have to deal with life right now. But
Yes. Well, for
it doesn't
you,
really feel good.
right. So when you say feel good, right, around quotation marks, can you be a very, very specific? Because again, I think so many people mistake that for, well, it feels good to go, drink with my friends. Like, yeah, it does actually, but it doesn't feel expansive all the time. And there's a difference.
Yes, there is quite a big difference. I mean, I had quite it was a few years ago in a Facebook group full of spiritual people that were smokers. And I had this conversation going, and I said somewhere along the line, when you take a substance, you're lowering your frequency.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this whole group was like on their behind legs and like, what? But there were some people there that got it because there were people saying, well, I need to smoke pot just to find my creativity. And then there
Yeah.
was another person saying, well, so actually your creativity is blocked and you need the pot to unblock it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you take a substance that is mind altering, or even doing sports because it's mind altering, or
Music.
obsessive stuff,
Mm-hmm.
then you got to ask yourself, why am I doing this, and why can't I get there naturally? Because
Yeah.
there's a natural high that you get from meditation
Yes.
or communicating with your soul or
Yes.
being in the universe or that
Yes.
you can never get to with pot or all these other things that
That's
are
right.
just escapes from that.
Yeah. So how do you help your clients really discern the pleasure seeking or relief the ego wants versus an actual connected, expanded soul experience?
Well, it's kind of a gradual process. What
Mm-hmm.
I help them to do is to communicate with their soul.
Yeah. How do you do that?
I teach them and I help them to communicate with their soul by learning to communicate with their inner child. Now,
Okay.
there's a lot of therapists that work with the inner child.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that also a lot of therapists forget or don't know that the wounded inner child is just one aspect of the inner child. Another aspect of the inner child is the divine inner child.
Oh, such a great way to say that to a therapist. Because we just automatically assume the inner child is just a wounded
Is
thing.
wounded.
Yeah, but
Yes.
you're saying there's a whole other inner child that is
Oh,
unwounded. Yeah, talk about
this
that.
divine inner child, I mean, when I first heard that I'm a shaman and that I've been a shaman for many
Mhm.
lifetimes and blah blah blah. Then I went on shamanic journeys and I had this light being coming to visit me on these shamanic journeys. And
Mhm.
what he was doing, he was putting his hand in my heart, and it was like he was turning a key.
Wow.
What does this mean?
Yeah.
So I went back to my angel lady. I said, yeah, this light being is visiting me and he's turning a key. And she said, yes, this is Sanat Kumara. He is your mentor. And what he is saying is that the divine inner child is the key to everything your heart desires.
Wow.
Everything. So then, of course, I went on to learning, okay, how do I communicate with my little Baukje? When is she the wounded one? When is she the divine one? To know the
Mm,
distinction and to know
yeah.
where I am at.
Yes.
And she helped me to actually heal beyond my ego. And yeah, I mean, right now we're going on these amazing journeys into the universe. We're flying with the 12 archangels of the central sun. We're doing all kind. I mean, this one, I'm dancing with him through the universe, Vishnu. I'm
Wow.
dancing with him through the universe. I mean, your divine inner child, she is the communicator, or he is the communicator of your soul.
Wow.
So
So,
learning how to communicate with this inner child is key.
so would you say that for distinctive purposes, you can talk to the wounded inner child, the divine inner child, and then there's an ego sort of being in the middle of that? Or would you call the ego something else?
I'd say like what I've come to understand is that the ego is like the culmination of suffering that still has not been healed
Hmm.
from this life, past lives, and from your ancestry.
Okay.
So it might be that you're dealing with something that's from your great 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 grandmother,
Wow.
or that you're dealing, because it's like this. You enter into this world, when you enter into the womb of your mother, and of course your family has been picked out with great precision by your
Yeah.
soul,
Yes.
so that all the hurt that you are coming to suffer is in the ancestry, it's in the DNA.
Mm. Okay.
And so, I mean, there's also souls that come in that take on extra luggage, as you might, on this journey. They just say, okay, I'm just going to grab all of this from the one human body, and I'm just going to heal that too. I'm just going to take all of this on in my ego.
Wow.
So what I see as the ego is just layer after layer after layer of
Mhm.
woundedness and suffering and negative beliefs, and I can't do this, or I won't be able to do that, or I will be punished if I go there, or if I ask this person so and so, or
Mhm.
and the feelings that belong with that.
Yeah, I think in
So
your podcast you mentioned one of your clients had an experience where, because she had been abandoned and then she had been a slave and a servant, that she was taught to never ask for anything of what she
yeah,
wanted. And so she
yes,
was carrying that weird, like, why can't I do that? Because it feels so overwhelming. But in your point, the ego is a transference of many possible lives or many ancestral, suffering that we here today, I think, in the age of Aquarius, are healing. Like, that's the whole reason we're here, is just
yes,
to heal this stuff, so that the
exactly,
ego is put in this small compartment that we still have, but that the divine child in all of us will just be expressed beyond what we can even understand to be true. We won't know what it's going to look like in 20 years, but that's amazing. And I love that you can sit down with a client very specifically and distinguish these different parts and talk about what's constriction versus pleasure or escape. Or, like, you sound very well versed to be able to articulate this to someone, but you
thank
also
you.
have your own guides who probably come in and assist.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, and then you have this creative side of you that does art to, I loved what you said before we got on. And I just want to have you talk for 1 minute about creativity, because we were joking, like, we don't need another like heartbreak, like achy breaky heart song. We need more positive art and just high level flow coming through our artists and our musicians, to
Yes,
bring up those beautiful, beautiful soul, soul based music. So
exactly.
what kind of art are you doing nowadays?
Well, I'm mostly drawing. I'm making a book, or my divine inner child is making a book,
Yeah.
and I'm like the pencil that she's drawing with, and
Yes.
she and it's going to be a book explaining about the divine inner child, but it's also going to be a book with artwork that you can meditate with, and that you get a deeper understanding in your emotions about Mother, Father, God, or about the ego, or about what you're here to do, or all of these things.
Oh, amazing.
And so, yes, I think it's amazing too. And the amazing thing is when you figure out that, for instance, dead artists are in my team trying to help me make the artwork.
Wow.
So David Bowie comes through, or
Really?
Matisse, or really, and I'm like, okay, who am I? But they're really eager for the artists of this world, and I think we're all creators. Because we are made in, I think it was said, like, in the image of God. And so, I mean, God is the creator, so we are creators. We are creating our own reality from the inside out.
Yeah.
So being creative, I mean, like I said in when we were chatting before the recording, is that creativity and intuition are sisters. They are sisters that are going to come to you together. So if you want to feed your intuition, be creative.
Yeah.
And
I think that creativity speaks to an emotional place in you that words can't. And so the fact that you are using both of those abilities within one book, where you may drop some wisdom, but then allow someone to intuitively connect through looking at the artwork into a deeper symbolic place in them, I think that sounds amazing. So I really hope to finish it.
And plus, it is so much fun to make it. It's so much fun. And because I mean, I have to calibrate myself to my divine inner child too. And sometimes it takes a little work. But when I get there, then it's amazing it's so joyful to be doing this, because it's really authentically me. Plus, I know it's going to help other people to understand more about themselves, to be more loving, to be more forgiving, to spread the word of love and forgiveness and compassion and loving kindness into this world.
Yes.
So it feels very joyful to do.
Yeah, that's the best part about it, is like I'm glad and thankful you're doing what you're doing, and you get to feel really great about it. So how can people find out about you? Where do they go?
Well, I have a website, and I just recently changed the name because Ego Boukje is a little bit afraid of calling herself that. And I just want to say, it's not me, it's my divine inner child and my team of helpers in heaven. But my website is called cosmiccreativegenius.com. Awesome. So if you want to find any information about me, what I do, then go and look on the website.
And I love it because it's super like creative. Like when you scroll through it, especially on your phone, it's like cute pictures, and like it's just really colorful, and it's just fun to look at, period, without any other reason.
Yeah, and it's all drawn.
Yes. Yeah, it was awesome.
By my little Boukje, it's her explanations, it's her coming through. And
and I will say that if you like this podcast, if someone's listening and they like this podcast, I think they would like yours, because they really did do a great job of explaining a lot about the ego. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here.
So thank you so much. And as a last thing, it might be helpful to mention my podcast, Heart Travels with Boukje.
Yeah.
You can find it on Spotify. And, so that's
it's on your website. That's how I found it.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Win, for having me. It was a great pleasure.